So a lot of organisations are looking into BYOD, bring your own device, to combat a number of challenges that are arising within the world at the moment. And there's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives when implementing bring your own device, or even considering it as part of your business function, or even from an ITAM perspective. A couple of the challenges that people are currently looking at tackling in particular are the dwindling hardware budgets. So when organisations have not a lot of money left in order to do hardware refreshes or even buy hardware net new, they're having to find new ways in which they are still able to keep the business going from a technology standpoint, whilst also adhering to these dwindling budgets. BYOD is obviously a natural option of being able to reduce hardware spend by allowing users to bring their own device, primarily looking here at mobiles and tablets, for example. Other reasons as to why organisations are looking at this at the moment is that they were providing mobile or tablets that were a base spec. They weren't really a good device. They weren't, an iPhone Pro 16 Max or one of the really good hardware models for a mobile provider or a tablet. And they're providing a base model. The users don't really like them anyway. They don't really get on with them. There was that conversation of, well, is it still worth providing a corporate device when they could just use their own device? And personally, I don't like carrying two devices around anyway. That's, having one phone is good enough for me. And a lot of other people within organisations want one device as well. They don't have to carry around a work phone and then also a personal phone. But organisations, a lot of them that I've seen, there may be others out there, are very strict on the fact that what they're providing is a corporate device. It is not a personal device. It is not for personal use. It's not for taking pictures of your kids. It's not for putting Netflix on there. It's not for putting Amazon Prime, etc., streaming services, gambling services, whatever you want to do in your private life. It is for organisational apps. It is for use for the company and for your job. Some organisations don't agree with that. They give you free rein to do whatever you want to do on the corporate device, but it's still a corporate device. It's still owned by the business. It's not owned by the end user. So there's a couple of reasons now as to why organisations, like I said, are looking to implement and invest more time, resources and effort into projects into implementing BYOD to phase out some of the ownership and the procurement and the budgeting for typical asset types such as your mobiles, your tablets, maybe even your laptops and any other kind of cool assets that you want to have for your job within your organization that you could also use personally or take with you throughout your career. Let's look at some of the positives then for BYOD. And the first thing is, of course, cost optimization. Technically, it is a lot cheaper if you implement BYOD because you're then not having to spend money on the physical device, the mobile phone contracts, even the maintenance and support, additional warranties, etc. that you're buying for that particular hardware asset. You may like to do a hybrid approach where you're saying that you provide the handset, we'll provide the SIM, and we'll provide the mobile contract, but you're responsible for the handset that the SIM goes into and that you use on a day-to-day basis. Or you may just push it all outsourced and say, look, it's no longer a benefit of joining our organisation. You have to bring your own device. The cost implications of that can be huge if you're spending, $500,000, euros, pounds a year, for example, on phone refreshing, on iPad or tablet refreshing. That can stack up over a large number of years, and that may be vital money for your organisation that results in a whole team staying within the organisation or having to be let go because the organisation doesn't have any money. There's one good cost benefit for that. And of course then, comes with the hardware, but if you're buying like Apple Care for Enterprise or Premium support or Premier support or Deluxe support or whatever the support mechanism is on top of those equipment because it was organisational owned, you're not only saving money on that physical hardware, but you're also then saving money on any of the maintenance and support behind it. So there are big cost savings in there. Of course, you need to then implement the technologies and the tools if you are using corporate-owned apps or to implement containers so that you can manage it from a security standpoint. But the cost of doing that will be so much less than the cost of what you're spending on the physical hardware and the support and the SIM cards, etc. itself, that it's still a very attractive option and one of the primary pushes for organisations looking at BYOD at the moment. Another benefit will be employee satisfaction. So they're using a device that they know They probably pick themselves. If it's BYOD, they've gone out and purchased it themselves. They know how to use it. They can use it for their personal. They can use it for their professional jobs as well. Yes, they can take pictures of their kids on it. Yes, they can have whatever apps they want on it. They only have one device, so that they can have all of their personal and work emails on there. You can still have your work apps on there as well. And again, it's just that one device. It's, you know, convenient. It might make your end users a lot happier that they can use a much better phone or tablet for their corporate life rather than the base model that you may have been providing. And yeah, they already know how to use it, so that there's no hypercare, there's no support required on how to do this, how to do that, apart from when you start containerizing it and start managing apps and data, corporate apps and data on that personal device. But they already know how to use it. They've got it set up. It's their responsibility. They only have to carry one device. They should be happier, right? They should be a lot happier. And then moving on to that brings flexibility and extra mobility as well, because, you know, dare I say it, I'm guilty of it as well. But if you've only got one device and you've got work emails on there, for example, you might be tempted to have a quick look when you shouldn't be looking, like at weekends or at holidays. You know, people can do that. If they want to feel connected, they don't want to miss anything, they don't have to take two phones away with them, they could just take their primary personal device, which has also then got a part of it stored away, contained for their organisation and their job that they're working for. That's another really big benefit of BYOD. You've also then got that productivity side of things, because they already know how to use it. They've already got the apps and stuff like that on there, so you might see an increase in productivity, especially on email replies, being able to do it quicker because they haven't put their corporate phone away for the weekend or for the holiday. Not advocating working on holidays at all. And then finally, it may also be an attractive option for recruiting new talent, to say that you can bring your own device. We just manage a portion of it for containerization for all of our corporate apps and all of our corporate data. But it's your device, you manage it, off you go. You're responsible for upgrading it, you're responsible for maintaining it. If you lose it, we need to know so we can make sure our data's safe. But other than that, it's all up to you. You can get whatever device you want, whatever phone contract you want, it's yours. You know, that for me would be quite a nice pull to say, okay, well, you know, that's fine, then I can use my own device. I don't have to worry about another device losing it, getting it damaged, getting it scratched, etc. Or even that hybrid approach of you provide the handset, we'll provide the SIM. Yeah, there's also that option as well. So that potentially is a good way to attract future talent. And then finally, of course, as well, selfishly from an ITAM perspective, there's reduced effort on me to build out hardware budgets, to do the IT procurement for all of those mobiles and tablets, and to manage them throughout their life cycle, which obviously, being an ITAM, we love doing. But if it's BYOD, I don't need to see them in my asset management database. Security teams need to be able to know and track it. But from my standpoint in the AMDB and CMDB, I don't need to know. It's not my asset. I don't need to manage it. I don't need to track it. So there's a lot of positives around it, and a lot of understandable reasons as to why organisations are moving towards a BYOD model, especially for mobiles and tablets. But you can also throw in laptops in there as well, where they give you a virtual instance. You use your own device and you go onto a virtual machines to access their environment. You've got a whole new desktop on there with the company apps, the company data, and never the two shall cross. You cannot take the data from your virtual instance onto your physical device. And I've been a consultant, I've had loads of these occasions, and again, it works really well. I can just switch from my virtual instance on the VPN, get everything that I need for a client, work on that client, then come off it, and it's my own device again. I love that. I really do love that. And again, the cost savings and the opportunities there are quite big. You could start off with user profiling certain people within the organisation that could do BYOD in that mantra, but make sure you've got the virtual instances set up and the licenses to be able to do so, and the infrastructure and support to be able to do so. But that could be another big win. Some challenges that you need to be aware of when doing BYOD: security, naturally, potential increased risk in security issues, because if it's a BYOD, your organisation may not be pushing security updates, OS updates, patches, etc. So there is that. Security teams really need to be aware of their BYOD devices that are entering into their corporate network, and they need to be able to control them and manage them. You don't really want to mix corporate and personal data as well. There could be a blurred line in that, but containerization is a really good way in which to manage that. So you just container a bit of the device that you're bringing as your own device. You container off a bit of that. The organization has control and visibility of that, and the rest of the phone or the tablet or the laptop is your own. So ways around it, but certainly something that needs to be aware of. And the patching and security updates is another big thing and another negative potential challenge that you need to consider when doing that one. There may also be compliance issues, regulatory issues, especially if you're in the financial industry, hedge fund management, etc., pharmaceutical even. You may not have the option to be able to do BYOD, or you may only be able to have the option to do BYOD for certain asset types. You'd need to find out internally what the regulations are for that one, but yeah, you don't want to start, impacting negatively on that, or breaching any regulations or compliance, or breaching any potential internal or external audits by implementing BYOD. You may end up with a more complicated and decentralized estate. You're likely to have a complete variation of different operating systems, operating system levels in terms of the Androids, the iOSs, etc., different updates, different patches, etc. It may become more complicated to manage, maybe more complicated to make sure that your applications are compatible with that device, etc. And then you could potentially be opening a whole can of worms of, your device isn't compliant in order to be able to do this. You need to upgrade your handset, you need to upgrade your OS, and you start managing something that's not yours because you need it to work for your container that you've got on that device. So potential increase in needing to do that management, a bit more of a complicated and complex estate as well, is the potential. But that's the whole point of BYOD, right? Is that the user can bring a device that they're comfortable with, that they've already got, that they want to use. It could be that you're used to using iOS devices and suddenly you've got Samsung Galaxies, you've got Google Pixels, you've got Huawei's, you've got OnePluses, you've got iPhones coming back in as well, but different models and variations. But that's the whole point of BYOD. You can't dictate to people what models and what manufacturers to buy from, what operating system. So something to consider, something that you definitely need to factor in if you are looking at implementing BYOD. Hidden costs as well. Think about all this BYOD that's coming in, how you're going to manage it from a security standpoint. ITAM, don't really care. It's BYOD. I care about what's going on it. I care about any apps, any licensable stuff, any data that's on there. Physical handset itself, don't really care about, but we need to be able to track it in a mobile device management MDM solution. Doesn't need to come into my AMDB, doesn't need to come into my CMDB. That's my opinion. Maybe the CMDB, there is an argument for having a CI item for a BYOD device, but from an AMDB standpoint, it's not my asset. I don't need to manage it. But in your MDM tools, you may need different modules, you may need different licenses, etc., in order to be able to manage these BYODs that are coming in, secure them, contain them, make sure that they're not a backdoor for any nastiness coming into your organization. You may also find something that I have actually experienced in a previous client years ago. In fact, during the whole pandemic was when they started implementing BYOD, and suddenly the network pressure just got quite high compared to what it was before. They basically moved away from laptops because, unfortunately, at the time, if you remember, the supply chain issues were an absolute nightmare in trying to get hardware. So they said, right, send it back. You need to use your own one for now. Okay, it was a temporary thing, but I believe they've actually started taking that on. They've started giving employees a bit of pocket money to be able to go and buy their own device. That's a whole HR thing, but is another option as well. You can give your employees a certain allowance every year to buy a laptop, for example, if it is BYOD on laptops, just to help them keep it maintained, keep it updated, etc. But this particular client moved completely BYOD, and the network spike went really quite high, simply because these people were still connecting to the VPN or whatever, but they were then looking at Netflix or browsing, their own internet stuff, outside of work, because it was their own device and they felt comfortable in order to do that. So that kind of put a bit of an increase on the network, and obviously creating all of the VPNs as well, put a strain on. So please do be aware of that. You don't want suddenly to implement BYOD, give all this remote access, all of this virtual access, etc., then for your network teams to go, we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the capacity for that, and then you're kind of stuck a bit, really. The two ones are really focused on the employee themselves, and the first one is data. Obviously, going back to, you have to manage it and contain it, but again, if it's a personal device, they could be that blurred line between moving it from your corporate instance to the personal instance. They could be sharing data with people you don't want it to be shared to. you need to make sure that that is really secured and locked down, especially on laptops. I find it a lot easier because you've got that VPN, you've got the VDI as well, so that you're logging onto basically a completely different machine. You can't just copy and paste to your other device, the device you're actually using outside of the virtual one. Of course, you can email yourself out files. People do it all the time, etc. But yeah, that's just definitely something to be aware of, is that data risk on there. Your information security teams really need to be comfortable, have the mechanisms and the tools in place to be able to manage that, to make sure there are no data breaches moving forward. And finally, on that user point, is the work-life balance. We mentioned it before that it could be a good thing, but then at the same time, are you promoting an unhealthy work-life balance? Are you promoting them checking emails when they're on holiday, checking emails late in the evening, on weekends, etc., because there is their own device? And it would just be so much easier on their personal device, where they've got their personal emails, to go on there and get their corporate emails as well, and then suddenly you find yourself replying to emails, joining meetings, etc. So yeah, that's something else to think about, is whether that does match your work-life balance, and whether that's something you want to promote within your organisation if you are implementing BYOD. So there's a lot of reasons as to why organisations are looking at BYOD. I know a lot of clients that are as well, but there are a lot of things to take into consideration. It's not just quite as easy as just going, boop, bring your own device moving forward. There's a lot of infrastructure behind it. There's a lot of security that you need to be able to manage and implement before you do allow BYOD. And then of course you've got to get the users on board. There may be things in their contract that states that they get provided with a phone or a tablet, a laptop, etc. That will need to change from a HR standpoint. It'll be a big culture change as well. Go back and check our videos on culture changing. It'll be a big culture change to bring your own device, and they might actually look after their device a lot more if it's their own personal one. But it's definitely a consideration. If you've got dwindling budgets, even if you just focus on a certain user profile or a certain asset type, like a tablet, like a mobile phone to start off with, and then evolve into laptops, etc., it could be a big money saver for you and could save the day in terms of your hardware budget, and even the organisation as a whole if they're struggling financially. So hopefully I've given you some food for thought on to BYOD or not to BYOD. That is the question. Really hope you found it useful, and until next time, happy iTamming.